Welcome to section 5. We're going to be looking at ways in which we can create desirable design. Design that is attractive to our customers, that inspires people, that makes people interested, that sells it. And depending on whatever context you're building for, whatever context you're designing for, whether that's quite a standard banking app, or whether that's a fun, exciting shopping experience, what we want to try and do is look at the key principles that can help us sell more, that can help us convert more, and also just improve everyone's user's experience. So we're going to look at specifically the role that design plays in the experience, and we're going to look specifically at if we can take it back, in the previous course sections, we've thought about the strategy that goes behind this and all the different layers. And so the following slide hopefully summarizes that quite well for us. So when we think about the foundations that we're building on, I didn't start the course 50 Shades of UX by jumping in straight to the design, because the design is actually the final bit. So if I have a list here of all the steps involved and then the different topics or the outputs that happened there, I want to start off with what we started with right at the beginning, was around strategy. When we thought about what the user actually needed, the business objectives and how technology all come together, those three aspects are critical, and we've got to build on that. We've got to make sure we're building the right thing, if you remember. But the layer up from that is thinking about, okay, now that we know what everyone needs, what are the things we're going to focus on? What are the things that we need to get right? And so I introduced then the minimum viable product. It's just like, what are the basic things that we need to accomplish? And, is that possible functionally? And that's the kind of the definition. Then we move up a layer and we actually go to kind of the skeleton of that experience. So if we know what users need and we've defined specifically what we're going to build, then the structure, the wireframes that we create, or the information architecture of how we're going to logically put everything in the right place, that structure is there. And so I want to start off by just saying that we've still not touched on design yet. Because we've got to make sure that we're building all of these right layers. And this is not a graphic design course, it's not a visual design course, but it is important for the user's experience. So then we've got that blueprint aspect, the user interface design. And so this here is basically coloring in the wireframes and making sure that the user is now able to start using this. And so that can be in the form of prototypes, of mock-ups, and even just early versions of the experience, when we're thinking about the user interface and all the interactions and all the things that make up a good experience. But there's a final step, which is what we're talking about a little bit in this section, the surface, right? So what is the first thing users see? They don't see the strategy, they don't see the definition, they don't see all the extra bits, they see the surface. They see the visual design, or the VX. And so although it's not the first thing we think about, it's certainly the first thing that users see. And that's why it's so important that we understand why we're building something, but we also need to understand from our user's perspective, this is the first thing, this is the first impression that they're going to get on. And so you can't have one without the other. You can't have a great strategy and not have a great design, but you can't have a great design without a good strategy. So these are all vital steps in the experience. But let's have a quote here from Dieter Rams. Would be considered one of the great granddaddies of design. And he has a really good quote here. He says, "A designer who wants to achieve good design must not regard himself as an artist who, according to taste and aesthetics, is merely dressing up products with a last-minute garment." And that's a really good point there. I've seen a lot of web agencies who don't really appreciate good design, and they just kind of say, well, we'll just spend a day or two just kind of adding a bit of paint to it, making it look pretty. So the design thinking, the design mindset here is that we're not just kind of adding on a splash of paint and coloring in a few bits and pieces, but we're really thinking about things like first impressions and how we can create a desirable application. How do we do that? How do we make that appear good so that the impression is lasting for the users? Well, here's some statistics from a 2004 study. Although it was a while ago, I'm sure you can agree with this. So it was a health website where basically 94% of all the customers, they all rejected the website because of design-related issues. The remainder, the 6%, left because of content issues. And so that's really important. We might work really hard to, get all the right bits of information and all of the clever technology, but end of the day, users will leave your app. They will uninstall it. They will leave the page because of design. And so design is fundamentally important, and design in a sense is greater than content. And on the right hand side, you can see just a list here of common problems that users have and reasons why they leave. Are we giving pop-up advertisements that just frustrate our users? Are we getting in their way and making it difficult to find what they're looking for? And so, there's a number of points here for us to consider. And just to kind of introduce what this section will cover, we want to try and think about the importance of first impressions and why they are so important to get right. We're then going to look at how we can apply key design principles into our designs. And then once we understand first impressions, once we understand key design principles, we can then look at how we can apply those specifically for style guides, for forms, and call to actions for our websites. The building blocks. We're going to go into the nitty-gritty and really focus on things like forms, how we should place our buttons. So I hope that you're excited for this section, and I hope that you can take these practical tips and apply them for your own projects.